Welcome to the Wednesday night Zoom Bible study. I'm glad that you've taken the time to watch this video, and I hope that you are blessed by it. Tonight is the 8th lesson of this study on the miracles of Jesus. According to Jesus, the kingdom of God is the gospel. It is the good news. And every time that Jesus healed someone, included an outcast, and cared for the poor, he gave witness to the nearness of that kingdom. Think of Jesus's actions as a foretaste of the kingdom of God. And not only do they give witness to the good news of the kingdom of God and that it has come near, but these miracles also serve as a means of proclaiming or confirming Jesus's identity. The miracle stories of Jesus are gifts to us. They are multi-layered in meaning, and they still have insights, valuable insights and lessons for us today. Tonight, we're going to take a look at one of the most well-known of Jesus's miracles, the day that he turned water into wine. What does this miracle teach us? What are some takeaways from it? Let's first look at the account, and it's only found in the Gospel of John. It's found in John chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and Mary, the mother of Jesus, was there. Jesus and his disciples had likewise been invited to the celebration. At a certain point, the wine ran out, and Jesus' mother told him, "They have no wine." Jesus replied, "Woman, what does that have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." She instructed those waiting on tables, "Do whatever he tells you." As prescribed for Jewish ceremonial washings, there were 6 stone water jars on hand, each one holding between 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servers, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them to the brim. "Now," said Jesus, "draw some out and take it to the person in charge of the banquet." They did as they were instructed. The person in charge tasted the water, which had been turned into wine, without knowing where it had come from. The only ones who knew were those who were waiting on tables, since they had drawn the water. The person in charge called the bride and groom over and remarked, "People usually serve the best wine first. Then, when the guests have been drinking a while, a lesser vintage is served. What you've done is to keep the best wine until now." Jesus performed this first of his signs in Cana in Galilee. In this way, he revealed his glory, and the disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother, his brothers, and his disciples, and they remained there a few days. Wedding traditions today call for a wedding ceremony, a brief reception, and then the couple usually go on a honeymoon for several days. But 2,000 years ago, forget the honeymoon. The wedding was all about a week-long reception, a week-long celebration, a week-long party. In the first century Jewish culture, where the rules of hospitality were everything, to run out of wine was a big no-no. Running out of wine with a house full of guests would bring real shame and disgrace to the family, and it would probably take them years to live it down. Many scholars believe that with verse 12 telling us that Jesus, his mother, and his brothers were present, it probably tells us that this was a wedding of a relative of Jesus's. If this is so, and it's only a theory, but if this is so, it helps explain why Mary took action when the wine ran out. Hospitality demanded it. It's a little confusing also that Jesus's initial response to his mother was, "My hour has yet to come." Now, this statement is repeated by Jesus throughout the Gospel of John until finally in chapter 17, Jesus finally admits his hour had come. Jesus' self-revelation and the purpose of his death unfold slowly in the Gospel of John, given time for Jesus' teaching and deeds to take root in the lives of his disciples. Much like the messianic secret in the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, where Jesus tells people not to tell of his deeds, yet they do it anyhow. In John, even though Jesus' hour had not yet come, Jesus still acts. That is so Jesus, isn't it? I like thinking that Jesus's first miracle in the Gospel of John was to simply keep the party going. Maybe he didn't want the bride and groom to be embarrassed and to be shamed. And I think that says something about Jesus being the one who takes away shame and disgrace. I also think this miracle says something about Jesus being the source of replenishment, refreshment, and abundant grace. You know, there will be times in our lives, like the bride and the groom, when we will face some type of emptiness. What are you empty of right now? When those times come, when those times of emptiness come, we can approach Jesus with our need, just as Mary approached Jesus with the need of the bride and the groom. Caroline Lewis, in her commentary on the book of John, writes, and I quote, "The primary revelation in this first sign of Jesus is what abundant grace looks like, and in this instance, tastes like, an excess of the best wine when you least expect it." End of quote. Listen, we are not promised a life that is absent of hardship, difficulties, or sufferings. But this miracle reminds us that we have a God who is extravagant and outrageous in love towards us, and that we have a God who will always show up in unexpected ways and in unexpected places, and will sustain us with, as John terms it, grace upon grace, even in our worst and barren of times. And who knows, when our figurative wine runs out, maybe it's just the beginning of something new. Let's not overlook that John tells us that this miracle happened on the third day, a phrase that always points us to the resurrection, always points us to new beginnings. But there's even more going on here. Each week at the beginning of the lesson, I've stated that the miracles of Jesus proclaim the good news of the kingdom of God, of the nearness of the kingdom of God. And this miracle certainly does that. To use John's language, it is a sign of the kingdom. Messianic passages in the Old Testament speak of banquets and of an abundance of wine. In Amos 9:13, for instance, we read a description that goes like this: the mountains, speaking of Messianic times, the mountains will run with new wine and the hills will overflow with it. Isaiah speaks of a feast that God will prepare for all people. In Isaiah 25:6, on this mountain, the Lord of hosts will prepare for all peoples a banquet of rich food, a banquet of fine wines, food rich and succulent and fine aged wines. See what's going on here? The water into wine miracle is a sign that the reign of God is breaking into this world. This first sign miracle of Jesus in the Gospel of John signals the nearness of that kingdom, and it becomes a foretaste of what is to come. And it also gives us a picture of a God who is extravagant, overabundant, and outrageous in love with and for all of us. It's a sign that our God and the kingdom of God is of joy and generosity. This is the God who provides 600 to 900 bottles of fine wine to keep a party going. That's what I guess the math scholars have come up with. Those 6 stone jars turn out to be about 600 to 900 bottles of fine wine. But this is also the God who is like a manager who pays a worker a full day's wage for only 1 hour of work, as I preached this previous Sunday. And this is the same God who's like a parent who welcomes home a wayward child with a ring and a robe and a huge cookout and party. And then finally, if we're looking for a lesson about our role in this, about how we give witness to the kingdom of God from this miracle, it would be this: we are to join with God in this work of grace and generosity. Here's something that we need to write down and look at it at every day. Whenever we take the side of love and mercy and kindness and grace and generosity, we will consistently find ourselves standing with God. Let it be so. So, in review, what does this miracle teach us? What are some of the takeaways? And this is not an exhaustive list, but first thing is that Jesus's first miracle simply keeps a party going. Jesus takes away shame and disgrace, and our God is not a killjoy. It also teaches us that Jesus is a source of refreshment and replenishment. As Caroline Lewis wrote, the primary revelation in this first sign of Jesus is what abundant grace looks like and tastes like. And let's not forget that God comes to us in unexpected ways and in unexpected places, and will sustain us with grace upon grace, even in the worst and barren of times. And finally, this miracle is a sign that the reign of God is breaking into this world. Messianic scriptures in the Old Testament speak of the best of wines and of banquets of rich food in this Messianic age. And then the application to all of this is that we give witness to God's reign. We give witness to God's kingdom by always standing on the side of God's love, mercy, kindness, grace, and generosity. Until next week, God's abundant grace and peace to you.